So now that we have our controller in place, let's go ahead and start working toward moving our data into the view. We'll start by right-clicking, Add View, and we will leave our view name as Index. We'll change our template type to be of type List, and then our model class that we'll use will be the Manage User View Model. So let's go ahead and just start by running our project to see what it looks like. Alright, and what we have here is a list of rows. These rows are coming from our database, from our view model collection, and we're able to see here that we've got first name, last name, email address, username, is active as admin, gender, and date created, as well as an edit, details, and delete buttons that were created as part of the template. So let's go ahead and flip back to our code and make some adjustments to this view. We'll start off by updating the header and changing it from index to saying manage users. And then from there, we can go ahead and we'll leave the action link where it is. That's fine. And then what we're looking at below here is the table, and that table has a table header. So that's the first TR, which is the table row for the header, and then the TH is the table header cell. And we have a cell for each one of our properties, and those properties are being used to generate our columns. So scrolling further down, we have a section here where we have a for each loop, and this for each loop is looping through each item in our collection, and our collection is defined under our models property for the view. It's just defined up here as an IEnumerable of manage user view models. So jumping back down to the for each loop, we'll see models, which is our collection, and then we have an item for each one of those items in the models collection. Inside of the TD tags, we have a display for HTML helper, and each one of these has an interesting way of notating it. We have the HTML display for, and this takes in our model as we've seen before, but our model is a collection. So we're using the parameter name model item to represent the model itself, but what we're actually going to end up doing is referencing the item on the right side of the Lambda expression. So we're using, in this case, item.firstName. And what will happen is it will take the first name out of the current item in the collection and present that in the table row instead of utilizing the entire collection as the model. At the bottom of our TD tags, we have a series of action links. These action links allow us to perform specific actions on each row. There's a primary key property that's kind of dummy fill-in data, and that's just there as part of the template to tell us, hey, pass in the ID of the row. So we'll go ahead and remove these and replace primary key with the .id. Now with our current view model, we don't have an ID property in place, so we'll have to go ahead and define that in our view model. So we can go ahead and scroll up to the top of our view, click on our view model, and then hit F12 or function F12 on the Mac, and then we can actually just modify our manage user view model class right here. We'll add a property for ID, and then we can jump into the constructor and we can make that adjustment here so that we can pull the ID right from the DTO and put it into our view model. So this is really nice to have this here so we don't have to go back into our controller and figure out where do we need to make all of those changes to make sure that we're mapping the ID from the DTO into the view model. So now let's flip back and we'll scroll back down and we can finish out our action links and change this primary key to say ID. Now if we want to use details, we'll probably end up pointing to the user profile that we created previously, but the user profile does not currently take in an ID. So what we'll need to do is we'll have to modify user profile and actually set it to have an optional ID parameter that we'll pass in here, but in a normal case we wouldn't pass in. So we'll set that to user profile. And then we'll flip back here, and inside of user profile right now we're looking strictly at the user.identity.name. So what we'll do is we'll add an optional ID here, and we're going to make this int nullable by adding a question mark. And then we'll make some adjustments to the action itself so that we can actually go in and pull the user either based off of user.identity.name, or we can pull it based off of the ID if it's passed in. And we'll start by actually separating out the user DTO. We'll put the if statement here so that the user DTO exists in either context. And then the ID, because it's nullable, has an optional has value property. So we can utilize that to determine if there's an actual ID. If there is no ID, then in the else, we'll use the same logic we had before to set the user DTO. Under ID.hasValue, we'll say user DTO equals context.users.find, and then we'll use ID.value. So now that we're accommodating for both cases of using the ID as an optional parameter, or we can still continue to use the user.identity.name to look up our user and pull up our profile. Alright, so now we'll go ahead and close our controller, and we'll go ahead and do a run and see what we got. So now if we click on edit, we end up getting a resource cannot be found, and it's looking at manage users / edit, which does not exist in our manage users controller. So what we need to do here is actually update our action link and add the appropriate controller as part of the data that we're sending over. So we have to find an overload that matches what we're looking for. So this one takes link text action, and there's one that takes controller name, but we also still need to pass in that route value. So the one that looks like probably fits the best is going to be one that takes link text, action name, controller, route values, and HTML attributes. So we'll go ahead and put in our account controller name of account, and then we'll add nullable HTML attributes to the end. So I'll just type null. Alright, so that will set that up, and we'll want to do the same thing for our user profile. Make sure that we're going to the right location, passing null for our HTML attributes, and delete, well, that currently doesn't exist, but let's go ahead and point it to account, because we'll probably have to set that up at some point in the future. Alright, so we've got that in place now, so let's go back, refresh our view, and click edit. Oh, and we forgot to handle our login because we're logged in and we have an authorized attribute on the page, so we'll go ahead and have to log in first. So we'll log in and jump back to manage users and click edit again. And now we can edit our profile for the user that we've selected. So I'll go ahead and make a change here to my last name. I'll type in GDog, hit save. And now that last name is updated there. So let's jump back to manage users and see if that change is reflected there as well. And there it is, Kevin G. Dog. So that record is now updated in our database.